Noel Razor Smith. You're someone I come across on the James English show. Must have been in lockdown, and I'm not just saying this because I did tell James this a couple of years back. Might have been 2019, I think maybe 2020. And it was an outstanding podcast. I think it was about 3 hours long. I remember watching it and being knackered at work the next day because I stayed up till quite late. Um, and obviously, you do something what I'm kind of known in books, but you're a proper author. I'm just winging it. You're creative. I just become obsessed with interesting characters. I couldn't for the life of me do what you do. And obviously, you've had quite a criminal past, but I'm more interested in the writing side of things, Noel.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you get into like writing books?
It was almost by accident, really. Years ago, around about 1990, I was in HMP Albany, which used to be a dispersal prison on the Isle of Wight, and they held a poetry competition, and there was a £25 prize. So I thought that'll do for me, and I came second, and that sort of, it ignited a sort of interest in writing for me. But how I wrote a lot of short stories and a lot of poetry, had a bit of success with that. But I mean, if you're going into poetry and short stories, you can't make a living out of it. It's never going to be, unless you're already famous, or
Yeah.
infamous. So what happened was, I became friends with a writer called Will Self when I was out in 1997. And I met him through John McVicker, who was a former Public Enemy #1, done a lot of Bird, and in the end ended up going straight and became a journalist.
Yeah.
And John introduced me to Will, and then I got to know him. He liked my writing, and then I ended up back in prison on remand for 8 bank robberies in 1997. And Will used to come and visit me in prison. He came up to Belmarsh when I was there. He came to Whitemoor, and he always said to me that I should write my life story. And I used to tell him no. I said, like, there's millions of them about. I've read them all. 99% of them are rubbish. 1% are pretty good books. I said, but I just don't want to add to that, pile of rubbish on the shelves that nobody's buying. And he surprised me, and he said, true crime is really selling these days. So I still said
Yeah.
no for a couple of years.
Mm.
And then, unfortunately, when I was in HMP Whitemoor, serving life, my youngest son outside, died. And, they wouldn't let me go to the funeral. It was just a fucking bad time, really, to be honest. And out of that, what happened then was my son's funeral was actually paid for by my in-laws. And I didn't really get on with them. It wasn't anything serious, but we just never see eye to eye. And it really hurt me that I'd stolen all this money in my life and I was not able to contribute to my son's funeral. So Will come up on a visit, and I said to him, look, if I write my life story, I said, do you think I'll be able to get anything for it? And he said, yeah, we'll have a go. He said, write 3 chapters, send it to me. He said, and I'll see. So sure enough, I sat down, wrote the 3 chapters, sent them out to Will. And it was purely to try and get money to pay for my son's funeral, to pay back my in-laws. That was my main aim with it. And sure enough, about 3 weeks later, I heard from Will, and a couple of publishing companies wanted it and were offering big advances. And he advised me to go with Penguin, which I did. Got quite a large advance off them and managed to pay back the money to my in-laws that they had spent on my son's funeral. So that's really why I've done it and how I got into writing books. Why I continued writing books is I was in prison then when that book was published, and it became a bestseller all around the world. So I would get letters from, America, Canada, Hong Kong at one time, people who'd read the book. And I see how much money I earned from the actual book, and I thought, why am I out robbing banks when I could be doing something legal that would bring me in the same reward? So really, that's how I stuck with writing books.
I mean, writing for, for me is, I mean, I finished, so I've released 22 books. I finished Junior Witters yesterday, was a boxer. So I've done in total 26, 4 not out yet. I find it therapeutic. How is it for you? You know, obviously you spent a lot of time incarcerated, but you know, you're obviously naturally creative. I mean, was it something you were good at anyway at school, like English?
No, far from it. In fact, I left school at the age of 14 to go to prison, and I could barely read or write. And
Wow.
I only learnt to read and write in prison. Actually, in solitary confinement, I tried to escape from Rochester Borstal in 1977, and I, during the attempted escape, I seriously assaulted a prison officer. And they, apart from the usual beating, they put me in solitary confinement then for 9 months. And while I was down there, you were allowed to read a book every day. That's basically all you were allowed. And they had these old books in a filing cabinet, and you could come out and pick a book every day, but I couldn't read. And these books were all quite thick books, and I used to just kick them around myself or use one as a pillow because they took the bedding out during the daytime. So if you wanted to sleep on the floor, you needed a bit of a pillow. And one day, a priest, a Catholic priest who used to come down to the block every now and again to check on the prisoners' welfare, looked through the spile, saw me kicking the book around the floor, and opened the spile and asked me why I was doing it. I said, well, I can't read. He said, why don't you read it? I said, I can't read. So he took it upon himself to really to help me to read. He brought me in some easy readers. He asked the screws down there if I could have a pencil and a pad. And they put it to the governor, and the governor said no because I was down for gross personal violence on a prison officer, that I might take the pen and stick it in him or something, or the pencil. So they give me crayons, and he used to come by every 2 days. Never come in the cell. He was only through the hatch. But I'd ask him about various words, and he'd tell me how to spell stuff. And I was down there for a long time, and by the time I left there, I could read. So that's how I got into reading. I can't remember what the original question was.
I mean, yeah, you were what I would probably call a professional criminal.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and obviously, yeah. What part can I ask? Can I ask? No, what part of London are you from?
South London. So I'm southwest, really. A lot of the main villains come from the southeast of London, but I was one of the southwest blaggers. So yeah. I got into crime at a very early age. I won't go into why. You can read it in my book. A Few Kind Words and a Loaded Gun covers the whole story. But I got into crime at the age of 14, and was committing my first armed robbery at the age of 15. At the age of 15, I stood in the dock at the Old Bailey and got sentenced to 3 years detention for armed robbery, possession of firearms, and grievous bodily harm. I'd done every day of that sentence, got out and went back into robbery. And all through the 80s, 90s, every time I got out of prison, I was getting massive big prison sentences. In 89, I got 19 years, escaped from prison. And whilst I was on the run, I committed another 15 bank robberies, a couple of shootings, just gangland stuff. Nobody killed or anything like that. It was nothing. I'd never hurt anybody. I know that's a bit trite, and you know, don't make no excuses, but I never actually fired a shot on any of my robberies, and I'm quite proud of that. Never hurt anybody physically. Of course, I've since realised, having done 5 years in therapy in prison, that what I was doing was actually traumatising people mentally and emotionally. So I can't say there were no victims in my crimes, because there were many of them. But yeah, so I ended up getting 8 life sentences under the 2 strikes and you're out act that Michael Howard nicked from America, and 8 life sentences plus 8 lots of 10 years for firearm possession concurrent, And I said to my barrister, this was in 1999. And when I came downstairs in the Old Bailey, and I said to my barrister, I've known him for years, um, Jim Sturman, his name. I think he's a judge now. And I said, how long do you think I'm going to do out of this, Jim? And he went, to be honest, he said, I can't see you ever getting out. He said, what with your previous convictions, the fact that this is a brand new sentence, it had only just come out in 97. So therefore, they don't know how to run it. And you're a lifer. So I don't think you'll be out until you're very, very old. He said, and that's what the judge wants because of your previous convictions. So he did say, though, I will give him this. He said, when you're up for parole, because as a lifer, when you go for parole to try and get out of prison, you're allowed to be legally represented now. And he said, I will come and defend you on your parole. He said, I'll come and do your parole here. And sure enough, he did 12 years later. But yeah, so I got that sentence. It was a pretty new sentence. Nobody knew how long anybody was going to be in. I mean, look at the sentence that come after IPP, imprisonment for public protection. There's guys who got that and got recommended to do 3 and 6 months and 9 months and 18 months. And that was back in 2002 or something. A lot of them are still in. A lot of them are still in jail, never been able to get out, grew up in prison. So I was quite lucky with a 2 strike. That got abolished. But I was given parole on my 3rd attempt and I was on license for life, but they released me in 2010.
Can I ask in total? Because I mean, I spend a lot of time in London, or have done for the last decade. I'm currently trying to do. We've got a mutual friend, Gary Hutton, who speaks really highly of you. London Tours Company. Gary's a wealth of knowledge. He literally knows every inch of the city. And for me, London is the most interesting city in the world. Samuel Johnson said, "When you're tired of London, you're tired of life." So with all them environments that you were in, you must have come across so many infamous, notorious villains, if you like. You know, your Reggie Crays, the who's who basically of the London world. Am I right?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, most of the people that were big when I was in crime are virtually unheard of in the outside world. Legends of prison, and armed robbery and stuff like that. But I met most of the older guys, like Frankie Fraser. I met him when I was in Wandsworth Prison. I met Reggie Cray in the Scrubs when he was on his way to Maidstone. And, you know, I was friends with John McVicker, who was, I was friends with him on the out after he'd actually been to prison and changed his ways and became a journalist. He was a good guy, John. He's died just recently. But I mean, he was a massive name in the 60s and 70s, John McVicker, and he changed his life around. And he was the template for a lot of guys like me who come later, who became absolutely ruthless major villains, not me in particular, but people who were embedded in the world of criminality and crime. But we always had that idea, because John McVicker had done it, he'd been able to turn his life around. He was kind of a figurehead to us. And Jamie Boyle as well, I have to say. Jamie Boyle was another one. Very, very, very violent man who managed to turn his life around. So we always had that hope, and those guys set it up for us, really. We sort of, some of us aspired to get out of crime eventually, and showing that these guys showed that you could actually do it. So, yeah, I did meet a lot of very famous people inside, but I mean, I'm not really one for them sort of things. Don't impress me. I was never impressed by the craze, you know. I mean, they would, you know, at the end of the day, they were idiots, weren't they? Committing murders in front of loads of bleeding witnesses. And just because they wore nice suits and they looked fairly presentable, people hero worship them. I was never one of those kind of people. McVicker really was one of the guys I'd wanted to meet when I was a kid, because I remember his exploits when he escaped in '68 and got caught again in 1970. So before I was even a criminal, John McVicker was kind of like, you know, he was known to me. The great train robbers. I mean, I was in jail with Tommy Wisby, who was one of the train robbers. He was a nice geezer. And I was also in with Roy, I think it was Roy James, one of the drivers, the sports car driver. He ended up shooting somebody, I think, and ended up with 3 years back in the 90s, and I was inside with him as well. But yeah, I've met basically nearly everyone. Charlie Bronson is a pal of mine. But I mean, you can't. Prison and crime is really a pretty small universe. So if you go into prison, there's only 80,000, 90,000 people in the prisons in the UK, right? And of those 90,000, there's probably about 5,000 who actually need to be there. People like me, people who are criminals and who are ruthless. The rest are just window dressing, mate. They're people who's got addictions to heroin, people who've got addictions to alcohol, they're mentally ill. But you know, we're in a society where those kind of people, instead of getting the help they need, they go to prison. So prison is mainly made up of quite inadequate people and quite petty offenders. So when you think about that and you think there are only 6 dispersal prisons in the whole country, and a dispersal prison is where you'll go if you are a category a double category a triple category A, or a B plus, which is like a BCAT prisoner with a long sentence and a history of violence or escape. So when you think there's only 6 of them prisons, and most of the people with the criminals you read about in the newspapers or hear about on the news will be going to those 6 prisons, and you get moved around those 6 prisons all the time for years. So you get to know basically everybody who is anybody in the criminal world who is in prison. It's just an unfortunate fact.
Well, there was yeah, sorry, there was a couple of questions I was just going to ask you there. Yeah, sorry. So one of the things that sticks out with the James English one, I mean, for people to change, I know this personally, you've got to be sick of your own shit. And there was one poignant moment in that podcast where you said to James, and I think you were talking about beating paedophiles up or something, and you said to yourself, what gives me the right to do this? And I think that was the light bulb moment where you were like, do you know what? No more. Was there a moment in your life, Noel, where you just thought, I'm sick of this shit, I need to sort myself out?
Well, funny enough, yeah. I mean, we at one stage during the 90s in Albany prison on the Isle of Wight and in other prisons up and down the country, there was a little secret organisation of guys, normal prisoners, what we call normal prisoners, who were ordinary decent criminals who decided that there were too many sex offenders and grasses getting away with it. And if they put them on the wings, it was our job to go and sort them out, to actually give them the beatings they deserved. I know that sounds fucking horrible, and it is. And a lot of people got severely hurt. People were set on fire. People had their cells set on fire. It was just a concerted effort between a group of prisoners to drive these people into, because of the criminal code and the prisoners code and all that. You don't suffer grasses, you don't suffer sex offenders. So anyone with a smell about them, you'd go and do them like 5-handed and get them shipped off the wing. They wouldn't be able to bring them back on the wing. So we've done a lot of that, and I've done a lot of that since the 70s in Borstal. We used to beat up people who were in for rape and stab them and things like that. So it was kind of like the culture of prison was that, and I embraced it fully and got into it in such a way in some prisons that I was at it all the fucking time, you know what I mean? Beating people up, setting light to their cells. And then one day I was in a prison, in Bristol prison, and me and my pal, we were on the second landing, and there was a few dodgy people on the wing, but we didn't really know who they were. Nobody would tell you. So my mate found out about one of them. We're sitting there having a cup of tea in my cell, and the door's open, and sure enough, the geezer appears at the top of the stairs. He's an old boy. So my pal went, that's that fucking Stefan Kishko. I said, who's he? He said, he raped and murdered a 7-year-old girl. So I went, well, on the spur of the moment, I went, right. So I went, whoop, stay there, slipped out behind him, full weight of 18 stones, smack into the back of him. He went flying down the stairs. I've legged it back into my cell. He broke his shoulder. So anyway, we're laughing about it. I thought, job well done. He didn't know who'd done it. Another nonce down. And then, I think it was about 2 years later, he was all over the papers that DNA had proved him not guilty, and they actually knew who the real geezer who'd done the rape and murder was. So he was released, but that made me stop. I went, fuck that poor. And when I read his story, he was like, he was a bit slow. He wasn't. He was kind of like what do they call it? I hesitate to say, but he was a very slow thinking sort of man, and he wasn't up for anything. And he apparently the police had got him to confess to this murder and rape, and his poor old mother, because his dad was dead, his poor mum fought all them years to try and get his case brought back to court. This fucking killed me when I read about this. And there was only one local newspaper geezer who believed her. And eventually they managed to get the case back to court in a blaze of publicity when they found out that his DNA did not match the fucking murder. He hadn't actually done it. Mm. And when I read that, I thought to myself, I thought at that moment when I knocked him down the stairs and we sat there laughing about it. And I thought, you know what? I'm not up for this no more, mate. I can't be doing it. Because I then thought to myself, how many other people over the years have you gone and done that are innocent? Mm-hmm. And that made me think, it was the first time I had a bit of conscience over that sort of stuff. So the next time anyone sidled up to me on a landing, which they normally do, and this is how they work. See that geezer down there? Yeah, he's a fucking grass. And you go, oh, is he? I'll have to go and do him. But the next time it happened, geezer sidled up to me. He said, see him down there, he's a nonce. I said, well, go and fucking do him then. And he went, what? And I went, go and do him. What are you fucking telling me for? What, do you want me to do it? Go and do him. I'll keep watch. And that was it. They fade out then. You know what I mean? They don't want to know. Because what people in jail try and do is get you to do the dirty work for you. And if you're fucking thick enough, like I was, you do it. But no more. After that, I never done it.
Yeah. No, can I ask you, how many books have you actually released then?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's about 9. It's 8 or 9, I think. But my last one was The Dirty Dozen, which is actually about a couple of pals of mine who I've also served time with, their gang were the most prolific armed robbery gang in London ever. They, I think they stole something like about overall £2.4 million from armed robberies. And they were one of the first gangs to capitalise on the, I don't know if you remember Thomas Cook's, the travel agents.
Yeah.
Do you remember them? Right. Yeah. Well, not a lot of people knew, but they were like a bank because they held foreign currency and they also held English currency for people who are going on holiday and people who are coming back changing their money. So someone sussed this out, and then Thomas Cook became more of a target than any bank in England because they were easy to do. You walked into a travel agent's and there was the bar at the back with all the money in it, you know, the screens and the safe right there. So they became big money. You could go in and steal like 35, 40, 50 grand out of a Thomas Cook travel agent. So why go and rob a bank? So they done all that, but they got brought down by a supergrass who's now in witness protection. But I mean, the Bradish brothers, they just got Vinny and Sean Bradish. They had so much charisma that at the time when they got jailed around 2000, all the papers were full of them and calling them the two bald geezers off EastEnders, because both the Bradishes have got bald heads. Phil and Grant. Yeah, they started calling them, and they were in all the papers and everything. But I mean, I wrote their story with their permission and with their help, and they gave me all the documents to read as well. So it's a very accurate book. It came out with Jesus Christ, I can't remember his name. I'll get to it. I'll remember it. But yeah, that's my latest book. But most of my books have been factual books. I've tried to write a novel and I've not been very successful at it. I think with novels, because you have to create everything, you've got to keep on top of it. I mean, Will Self, who used to be my agent, and he's a good friend of mine still, I went up to his writing room one day because he writes novels. I think he's written about 27 novels, but he writes novels, and the system he has for doing it, my mind is so chaotic I could never do it. He had this room, and all round the room on the walls were post-it notes. all different colour post-it notes, and each different colour was a character with a little idiosyncrasy or a little history. And the room was just full of it. And I thought, wow, that is brilliant. And I thought, I've got to do that. And then I realised I haven't got the patience. I ain't got the patience for doing that, writing down characters and all that. I basically wing what I do. It comes out of my head. If I need a bit of research, I talk to people. So, all that, like preparing for a novel and things like that, it frightens the life out of me. It's too much hard work.
I've just remembered what I was going to ask you. So obviously, to people up north like myself, people in Aberdeen, all over Great Britain, people have this illusion, and I did as well, until years ago. Kind of Gary Hutton kind of clued me up. The real EastEnders, your Mile End, your Stepneys, your Bethnal Green, they don't subscribe to all that kind of career bullshit, if you like. I mean, I've been with people who, I've done a lot of bad characters. Your Paul Sykes, your Roy Shaws, your Lee Duffys, probably a few others that I wouldn't want to give light to. And but just because Tom Hardy made them, played them, the Kemp brothers played them, it's cool. But what you said earlier, they were literally evil, and a lot of people in the East End, like a cringe. This it's almost this mythical folklore image all around Great Britain, but inside the real Cockneys, they're just like, this is not what we're about. Do you feel? Can you understand what I'm saying, Noel?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I know there's lots of people that love them and all that, but they love what they think they know about them. In the real world, they were thieves, ponces. They were the kind of guys who were too afraid to go out and rob a bank or hijack a truck. But if you did and they heard about it, they'd want their share. So they'd bully you or torture you to get their share. They weren't nice people. They used to put the arm on pub landlords and stall holders to pay them a pension every week. I mean, that's, it's demanded with menaces, and, they've done what they've done very well. But I mean, I know there's some people in the East End who really still worship them. And you say stuff about them, and all of a sudden you're the bad guy. I mean, they don't want to hear the truth about it. But in prison, the East End and South London have this kind of almost friendly rivalry. So you're always trying to think up insults for people. It's quite friendly. It's just banter, really. But I remember the best one I heard was there was a guy from East London giving it to two South London fellas in a friendly sort of way. And one of them went, but the thing you got to take into account is this. He said, when the great train robbers got nicked, who were all from South London, nobody said a word. No one wrote a statement. He said, when the Crays got nicked, he said people were running out the East End, sprinting and spraining their arms to sign statements against them. Loads of people come forward after they were nicked and went, yeah, they're horrible bastards. But people seem to forget this. You know what I mean? To me, they were a different class of criminal, if you like. I mean, South London criminals are working criminals. East London criminals in those days were more, I mean, you look at the Crays and the Richardsons. The Richardsons were South London. Yeah, they were horrible fuckers as well. Of course they were. But that was, that was how it was at the time. But the Richardsons were also smart. They had legal businesses. Charlie Richardson flew to South Africa. He bought a diamond mine or a gold mine or something, while the Crays was still taking a tenner a week off publicans in the East End. So, I can understand why people these days would think they were very glamorous, and with their suits and the pictures and all their celebrities, they were great. And, let people have that. But don't think that's the real craze. Don't think that's real criminality. Because what you got there is an illusion that you're worshipping.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, night falls. What can I say?
Do you know, Noel? I've met so many of that. Even people I haven't written about, I've met, I've spent time with, and there isn't any code of decency. They'll happily threaten your wife and your kids and all this kind of thing, and that was belonged back in then, and like. I've read, you know, years ago. I mean, I grew up. I was fast. I mean, it is an unbelievable story. It is a truly incredible story of two twins. They've got such a unique name. They grew up, and you know, I've always been fascinated. I got kind of obsessed with Jack the Ripper when I was about 11. Then of boxing, a lot of the East Enders, you know, it's a concrete jungle. You've got to fight your way out with it, if you like. You know, there's so many people in the East End, your Jack Spot Commas, all this kind of thing, but there's no, it all belongs in books. It's a fairy tale, you know, and people don't quite understand that. Gary Hutton, I mentioned earlier, he kind of opened my eyes to a lot of it, and it is romanticized. You know, it's really good. The black and white photos, but it is a complete tall story that, you know, these people only had their own because it was complete crap.
Yeah, that was rubbish. I mean, the worst thing for me was the thing that always frightened me when reading about the craze was they had a tendency to stick bayonets up people's arses for looking at them funny. You know what I mean? You looked at me funny, therefore I'm going to stripe you. Fuck that. You know, who needs to live in that sort of atmosphere? They rule by fear. You know, and people seem to forget the fear and misery that went along with all their crimes. Oh, you could leave your granny's door open. But if you did, one of the Craig geezers would go in and take the money out the gas fucking meter. It's all bullshit. It's all romanticized crap. You know, in reality, crime is a dirty, fucking, filthy business. It's brutal. It has to be brutal and ruthless in order to get the prize. And people who try and make villains into fucking angels because, you know, they wore a suit or they look good, it's just absolute fantasy.
Yeah. You know, I can tell that you've got genuine remorse when I watch that James on, and you've changed for the better. So just going back to your books then. So what's the plan for you, Razor? I mean, what kind of things are you doing in your life now at the minute? What's your everyday regime?
My day job, I'm still the commissioning editor for Inside Time, the National Prisoners newspaper. So every day I'm typing up letters from prisoners. This is how I keep in touch with all the prisons in the country and know what's going on in them, is because I have to, because of my day job. So we produce a newspaper, 67-page newspaper once a month, news, mailbags, histories of prisons, various different articles, and that goes into every single prison in the country, every Scottish prison. It goes to British prisoners abroad, so it goes all over the world, Singapore, Hong Kong, places like that. Not Hong Kong so much now, but Thailand and places like that where there's British people in prison. It goes to the Houses of Parliament to go into their reading room, and it goes to, I think, most of the solicitors and barristers in this country, and prisoners' families can get it. And we've got a website, the Inside Time website. So that's what I do as a day job. Funny enough, just before I was talking to you, I was on a editorial meeting, a Zoom editorial meeting for the paper. But recently, I've started thinking to myself that I should write another book, because I'm getting the urge to do it now. You know, I mean, things are coming to me, and I'm thinking, but I still haven't decided. I mean, I'd like to write a novel. I really would. I'd like to write the definitive British prison novel, to be honest. That's my aim. Whether I could do that is another thing. You know, it takes a lot of dedication, a lot of work. But I'm definitely thinking of starting another book quite soon. And I'll decide in the next couple of weeks what I'm going to write about. It may be another factual one. I mean, what I've got left to finish off is my last 2 years in prison. Where I went to from Grendon, which is where my last book about it ended. And I went to a prison called Blantyre House in Kent, which was semi-open. And that, I mean, some of the things that went on in Blantyre House, no, I don't mean, well, some of them are scandalous. For example, Blantyre House was one of the only prisons I ever went to where they had a Viagra dealer. Like every other prison, you get heroin, you get crack, you get puff, you can get spice. Blantyre House had a Viagra dealer. And the reason being is because nearly everyone who went to Blantyre House within 3 months would start being released for day releases and home leaves and weekends with their families. So guys who'd been away 10, 15 years had never even heard about Viagra, and people was going, yeah, you want to take a couple of them with you. So he had quite a lucrative business dealing Viagra. Yeah, it was a fun time.
How old are you now?
I'm 62.
And
I know I only look 70.
how many years would you? I mean, I'm releasing my last true crime book. A guy called Michael Showers. You probably know him.
Yes, it wasn't he Yardy? No, he was a drug dealer, wasn't
he? Yeah, he was kind of known as Mr. Big in Merseyside.
That's right.
I think me and him worked out that the court had given him something like 44 years.
Yeah.
And he'd actually served something like 26 years. His prime. I remember talking to Chris Lambriano. I spent a bit of time with him, and he said, "Do you know what? My prime years in my life were eaten by locusts." And hindsight's a wonderful thing. How many years have you spent in prison? And are you at peace with yourself? Do you look back and think, "What the fuck was I doing?"
I actually worked it out. I spent just over 32 years in prison, which is more than half my life. Eh?
I'm probably going to say 15, 18 there.
No. I mean, when you look at it, some of the sentences I got were outrageous. I got 19 years for armed robbery when most of the people I was knocking about with were getting 12s. I was always one of them people that they always hit hard. And I expected it. And when you go into crime, you got to expect what you're going to get. And I never complained about none of it because I deserved it. None of my crimes was I innocent of. Believe me, I'd done them. So 32 years, I mean, I've got 8 life sentences. If I'd have served all them, I'd never be out. So compared to the bird that I was handed, the time that I served, I escaped from prison once. And I had one really good touch in 97. When I still had, I think it was 6 years left to serve, they suddenly changed the law and made it retrospective. It was, the case was Regina versus something Hill. It was a woman's prison anyway, and they complained that they'd been on remand for various charges, been on remand, and their remand hadn't come off their final sentence. Now, because I had so many different remands, they suddenly give them to me back, but never told me. So I'm sitting in a prison one day, in a BCAT prison on the Isle of Wight, playing cards, and I get called down, and they said, "There's a parole officer here to see." And I went, "What do you mean?" I said, "My parole I haven't even got parole for another 5 years." So they went, "Well, apparently it's the change in the law. They've give you back the time that they took off you. So now you're eligible for parole." So I'm thinking, I'm never going to get parole. I thought I'll go and see him anyway. So I've gone down there, and he was a nice geezer. We got chatting and that. So he said, "Are you going to come back to prison?" And I went, "No, I'm determined to stay out, give him all the spiel." Anyway, went away, and about 4 months later, my name comes over the tannoy. I'm not expecting it at all. I've just applied to be a Category C prisoner, and they went, "No, you're too dangerous to go to a Cat C. You'll escape." Right? Then they called me over the tannoy. So I come down to the office. There's about 8 screws in there and a governor, all white-faced. So they look at me and they went, "Smith, I have something to read to you," says the governor. So I went, "What?" And he went, "The Home Secretary has decided to grant your parole." I'm like, "What? You'll be leaving the prison in 7 days." Out of the blue, I think I've got 6 years left to serve. So I went, "Fucking hell, this is brilliant." So anyway, sure enough, I got out of prison. And I was back in a year later, serving 8 life sentences. So there you go. It was a lot of bird. And I'll tell you what, if I had to do it all again, there is no way I would do any of that again. People think prison is glamorous. They really do, some people, I mean, they see it on the telly or they see porridge and think, "Oh, yeah, I could do a bit of that." Mate, yeah. I'll tell you what, it stops being glamorous when you are laying in a fucking cell with broken ribs, covered in your own blood and vomit, and looking at another 15 years to do. Then you say to yourself, "You know what, this ain't worth the fucking candle." And it ain't. But we convince ourselves when we're young and when we're going through this merry-go-round that what we're doing is normal. It's not fucking normal at all. And and another thing is, kind of guys like me in those days, like the people who were proper, what we call proper criminals, bank robbers, people who rob security vans, you know, serious criminals. We all thought we were gentlemen criminals. We all thought we had a bit of fucking, you know, we could have a bit of pride in what we're doing because we're not robbing old grannies and we're not burgling people's houses. But in reality, we're just fucking scumbag criminals with guns, mate. That's the only difference. So, yeah, I've done a lot of bird. And if I had the chance to do any of it again, I wouldn't do any of it. I'd have stayed out and I'd have probably earned as much money, you know, working on a fucking building site as I would have done from crime in my life. And I'd have been a lot happier. So it's not glamorous and it's not fucking clever.
You see, I mean, YouTube is a haven for, excuse my French, thick bastards who brag and talk about how hard they are. And it's like, I've got to admit, I mean, I've been quite close to Gary Hutton in the last year, speak daily. And I've actually cringed at some of the people, the books I've done. I thought, like, I've ran a lot of them out of print and I'm just like, what was I doing? And you know, there's so many bullshitters on here, but no, I mean, I do not have many on my my personal. I think it's only about 250, but I enjoy watching your memes. You're literally like my meme dealer. I've been following you for I don't know how long, but I literally wait for your memes coming up a day. If people are watching this and they want to get in touch with I'm going to put the links in the bio. Can you tell me some of your links that you're on for people to get in touch?
To be honest, I don't know a lot about that sort of stuff. I mean, Mrs. does that, but I'm on Facebook as Noel Stephen Smith, and I'm on also as Noel Razor Smith, which is a different page, which is mainly a business page. And I've done my own podcast as well called, I can't remember what it's called, but I've done my own podcast, so you can find that somewhere probably. I think there's about 20 episodes of it with me just talking to my mate about various different aspects of prison, you know, like pay and things like that. Quite interesting stuff, I've got to say that. I'm trying to get people on there. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I don't really do a lot. I've only just got on that WhatsApp, because my kids and my grandkids are on it. Yeah, you know, so it's a way of keeping in touch with the family. So yeah, I don't really do a lot of promoting and stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to have a round up all your links and put them in the bio. Anyone wants to get in touch with Noel, very, very approachable fella. And again, I do enjoy. I literally wait for it now. Do you know what I mean? I'm at work and I think, and I go looking for, do you know what I mean? All the memes and all this, and it always brings a smile to my face. Just before I let Noel go, has anyone got any questions for him? And as I said, writing, is it something that you're going to do forever? Does it bring you a kind of peace now? And you told me that I mean, how many books do you think you've got left in you?
Oh, I've definitely got more in me, no doubt about that. But it's what it is. I'll tell you the truth. I've become a bit lazy. So for a few years, I just rested on what I'd already written until I'd done the last one. And now I'm thinking to myself, I've got so many ideas. I've got to put something down. And I've got to tell you something about the memes as well, Jamie. If the only reason I've done this podcast, because I don't normally do them, is because you're on my meme page. You like me memes. I like to keep people informed and happy.
Do you know what? A lot of how my mental health has rapidly improved this year is down to your memes.
Oh, nice one. They're doing a job then.
Can I just, so there's a question there for you. Do you stay in touch with your Dublin roots?
Yes, I do. Of course I do, yeah. I've got a lot of cousins still over in Dublin. Great people, the Regans. And I was over there about, I think it was about 4 years ago, just before the COVID thing, and met up with one of my favourite cousins and all her sons. Yeah, I do definitely keep in touch with Dublin.
Yeah. There's a question. There's another one for you there on the screen.
My eyes won't see that; it's too small.
Shane Rhodes is just saying he's read your first book, very good, Reformed Criminal. Yeah, you can tell a mile away that you kind of, I've met so many. I've been involved with people, and they're beating 10 people up on every page, and there's people I've been around with, and as soon as they've gone, I've been like, my fucking head's busted, I need to go lie down. You can tell that your hindsight is a wonderful thing in your 60s, and you think, what the fuck was I doing all them years? And but there's some people that will never ever get like that.
No,
Question:
I've met them.
Do you think Charles Bronson will ever get out?
To be honest, I hope he does. Honestly, I do. But I can't see anybody ever taking a chance on letting him out. And what a lot of people don't understand about Charlie Bronson and any other person in his position is it's not a case of going up and getting parole and they release you. All they were going to do was take him off category A down to category B for a couple of years. He'd have to be in a cat B prison on normal location, then category C for a couple of years, then category D, then he might get parole. But they're not going to release him from a cage in Wakefield or from wherever he is at the moment.
Yeah. I know there was a lot of talk, might have been last year or earlier this year, and I mean, I've been in several prisons myself, and I know how hard it is. So they're not going to let someone who's probably been around a handful of people for the last thingy to. It's impossible. I hope he does. I know he reads my books. He sent me a few letters. He's read a few of mine. He always says my covers are crap. Basically, he wanted to do it, but I can't see it. I think he'll be. You can't fight the system that long.
He'll end up like Reggie Cray, I think, where they'll let him out when he's really infirm and about to die.
Yes, he'll be made an example. I've actually been into prison. I actually went to see Paul Sykes Jr. So I've been inside to interview people. I've spoke to people inside, and it is unbelievable. So someone's a cat A, and it does go down to B, and for him to have a chance, he'd have to be on a normal for at least 2 years. So all that talk last year, I'm going to get out, and it's like, I mean, I just don't understand how do you do? I mean, even I'm asking this is to you as well. How do you do? I mean, I got 18 months when I was a kid. I'd done half, and it taught me enough to say, fuck that. I remember talking out loud to myself when I was about 19, 20, saying, Jamie, don't ever forget how bad this is. And I don't understand how people can do 1 year, 5 year, 10 year. How does that work? How do you not think you've got, it's like anything in life, drinking, you just get sick of your own shit. And I don't understand. Maybe you can enlighten me.
Well, you say to yourself, if you go up to court tomorrow and you get 20 years in prison, you got to look at 3 things. You can either escape, and that's highly unlikely. You can, but really hard. You can kill yourself, and then you're out of it. Or you can do your fucking bird. And that's what you have to do. You have to cut off the outside world, and you have to say, this is my world now, and you become a different person, and you trot along, and every day you wake up not saying, oh no, not another fucking 10,000 days. You wake up and say today, and that's all you deal with is that day. Because in prison, you have certain goals for the day, like getting out your cell, making a phone call. So this becomes like a hunter thing. You have to get your things every day, get enough snout to bang up with, although you can't now. There's no smoking in prisons. But you just take every day as it comes. And I know that sounds really fucking cliched, but that's how you have to do it. Or you look ahead and you just go into despair and you want to kill yourself. But another thing you want to take into account, Jamie, this is a fact. A lot of long-term prisoners end up in mental asylums, places like Broadmoor, Rampton, places like that, mental hospitals. And because they can't handle that amount of time in jail, it is a nightmare fucking existence, mate. Waking up, seeing the same shit every single day. You've got to have a sense of humour to survive intact. Luckily, I had one. And you've also got to be strong-minded. Otherwise, you just crack, mate.
Can I just run something by you? Obviously, I mean, I was a teenager, but you were allowed to smoke then. So was that right what you said there? So say, for instance, I'm smoking 40 a day. I go to prison tomorrow. There's no smoking in British prisons at all?
No, they'll sell you a vape. An electronic cigarette. Yeah, yeah. People are buying vapes in there now. There's no matches. There's still people smoking drugs, but they have to smuggle in the light. They have to smuggle in the fucking papers, everything. You know what I mean? It's made prison double hard. Smoking was one of the things that kind of kept the lid on places. You know, especially smoking cannabis. That was massive when I was in the early days, and the prisons were quiet. Take it away, give them spice and heroin. That's it, mate. You're fucked. You got the recipe for disaster there.
Do you know? I mean, you do learn some amazing things inside. Little things like cutting matches in half, cutting like lines across cells, and some amazing things. And it's like, wow, you can learn some unbelievable things. But you know, there's a Greek philosophy. I think it was said in the Karate Kid. Extreme situations require extreme measures, and
Exactly.
you know. But no, do you know what, Noel? It's been an absolute pleasure, sir. I'm really glad I've got you. Can I just say, keep your memes. You're one of my favourite Facebook friends. I think I've only got about 250 on. I won't add anyone I don't know. Death threats and Osmond warnings get very tedious. I don't mind the abuse I get on here. I quite often get told I look like a lesbian. You know, but you know what, mate? You always cheer my day up, mate, and I was honoured to have you on, sir. So what I'm going to do, if anyone wants to get in touch with Noel, I'm going to put all his links in the bio after this. Very approachable, very friendly. It's been an absolute pleasure, sir. We'll keep in touch. God bless.
And me, Jamie, nice one. Good to talk to you, mate. Be lucky.
Take care. Bye.
See ya.